Okay, yes, we're joined now by Mr. Henry Boyo, who is an economist, to break down all of those figures for us this morning. Thank you for coming on this morning.
It's my pleasure.
Well, looking at all of those, I mean, there's this mindset you could just get lost in those figures and think, oh, okay, having done that, 510 billion, and then people could run with the pressure. Okay, it's all well now. Break it down. This rebasing of our GDP, which shoots us higher than South Africa, an indicator for the performance of our economy. What does this really mean?
I'm glad you made the comparison with, with South Africa. The taste of the pudding, they say it's in the eating. Even if you nominally have indications that your economy is greater than that of South Africa in terms of output, your own optical comparison of the social welfare and the level of investment, the level of infrastructure that is currently in South Africa would probably make you question the validity of the claim that we are, in inverted commas, better off than South Africa. Yes, we may be bigger, like a giant, but we certainly are not very effective in terms of the utilization, the management of the resources at our disposal. In any case, you don't have a situation where in South Africa the level of unemployment is lower than in Nigeria. You can't have the same level of maybe inflation, the quality of life of the average South African. I'm not saying there are no ghettos there, of course, but in reality, the fact that a lot of Nigerians feel more comfortable migrating to South Africa, I think gives you an indication of what their judgments would be. So my take is very simple. Yes, it is possible that as a result of the rebasing, people see you as a giant in terms of your potential, but it doesn't say much more than that. In reality, it is like if you have a house and over the years you inherited it from your father, and within 20, 30 years you added more equipment to it, and people who used to value the property had been using a valuation of before your father even got the property from your dad. And in your time, you have managed to add additional value to the property, and you couldn't expect that it would be appropriate to keep saying that the house is just worth the land that your grandfather purchased. Other things had also been included. In
other words, this indicator, which indicates the size of our economy, does not necessarily indicate the performance of our economy, does it?
It absolutely doesn't. Well, if you want to look at it in terms of performance, I think the Minister of Finance herself will agree that it can't be credible performance for us to have the level of unemployment we have, for us to have inflation at 7-8%, because, as I said some time ago, an inflation rate of 7-8% means that you should be getting increases in salary of about 7-8% a year. We know that in Nigeria this is not true. And that implies that you would probably lose maybe 30%, anything from 28 to 30% of your value of your income every 4 years. Okay? That can't be good news, especially for those who have static incomes like pensioners and people like this. That is why you see over the years, with the level of inflation that we have, people who are getting pensions, you find that they have become impoverished as a result of the loss in the purchasing value of the static incomes most of them have.
We're told that this data now is what investors can use in assessing our economy, but at what point does statistics meet up with reality? Because people always say, well, yeah, much as you have the statistics, but just as you said, unemployment, what about those key issues? Is it affecting the person out there on the street? How do we juxtapose both?
Well, it's attractive for an investor to see you have a large bank. Even if I can use that analogy of, a well-padded young lady who's, and you find at the end of the day it's basically artificial stuff all that type of thing. So basically it's the same thing. If you look at an economy like ours and you see the potential for growth, economic growth within the system, and yet you have very disturbing indices like the high rate of unemployment, the high rate of interest, the fact that our own government admits to borrowing money it doesn't need, only to warehouse those monies at a price of 10, 11, 12%, and we all keep quiet and smile about it. I mean, these are all disturbing factors. The fact that we also borrow at the time that we say we have a surplus.
Thankfully, they said no more borrowing this time.
Well, I think she probably is being a little bit. She didn't say there won't be no borrowing. She said we'll try and control borrowing, but haven't said so. I think last week there was an information that the DMO was going to raise $1 billion or something like that. So, I mean, already there's an indication that we are going to borrow in spite of what she has said. Domestically also, we don't seem to, all of us don't seem to be worried that next week they'll probably be mopping up excess liquidity again, which is, like I say, borrowing money you don't need at 11, 12%, in spite of the impact of that on the economy.
Okay, taking the word impact from you, because one thing I've come to get from you is that sometimes you try to analyze these things without putting figures to it, which is even better for the ordinary Nigerian. And we'll talk about rebasing of our economy and talking about what the World Bank Group has said about Nigeria being one of the most extremely poor nations. And this is coming just a week after that particular report. How does this affect the ordinary Nigerian on the street? When we talk about a fantastic figure, we're now a better economy than South Africa. So how does it reflect to the man on the street for him to know that truly we're on course, on the positive streak?
Well, the man on the street, and unfortunately there are so many of them on the street without jobs now, cannot be happy if he cannot be provided with gainful employment so that he can live a life that has a little bit of dignity. He doesn't have to live on, he shouldn't be a dependent even at the age of 40. Well, it's not surprising. We also, as a country, we are still dependents after, 60 years of independence also. So maybe we have transmitted that gene into our economic system, and that would be rather unfortunate. But the reality, of course, is that the man on the street is interested in having food on his table. He's interested in making sure that he can, the money he gets at the end of the day can take him to and from work and still leave extras. But in reality, you don't have that kind of, how would I say it, benign economic environment, not with your minimum wage at about 18,000 naira a month. I am surprised that when they make these announcements of these very, exotic, achievements, often we don't look at some of the much more serious indices in the economy. I mean,
so what are they?
For example, the issue of exchange rate. We have gullibly accepted the exchange rate mechanism in this country for over 30 years, and that's rather unfortunate. There is no reason whatsoever, and nobody has been able to tell me why it is so. Maybe you guys can help. In a situation where you have $4 billion worth of reserves, okay, and you have 4 months imports cover. I have qualified it, 4 months imports cover, 4 months. $4 billion worth of reserves. And I think about 2 years ago, we had 60 billion reserves, yeah? And we were told that we had, between 15 and 20 months imports cover. But interestingly, you have a situation where when you were much poorer with $4 billion and a shorter imports cover, you have an exchange rate, or you had an exchange rate of 80 naira to a dollar. And then surprisingly, when you have 10 times, 12 times that value, and extended imports cover. So don't tell me we were spending more. We could be spending more, but we had enough cover for a much longer period than we had in 1996. It's impractical. It's not realistic. It's not commercially wise that you should be talking of an exchange rate that is double what you had in 1996.
You don't think that inflation rate has anything to do with that?
No, it's a very simple, how would I say it, manipulation of the exchange rate of the naira. This is not inflation. This is the result of a deliberate manipulation of the exchange rate of the naira. The analysis I've just given you shows very clearly, okay, that it is inappropriate that we should have an exchange rate of 160 naira when we have an extended imports cover, Okay? In fact, it means, in effect, that the more that you earn, the poorer you become. But that is the framework, that is the product of the framework that we are operating at the moment.
How important was it that we rebased our economy?
It's good for the ego. Certainly it's good for the ego.
Just the ego?
Because, some people will say, that has come out that, there's so many things that happened in the last 24 years since we last rebased that we haven't really captured. For instance, the ellipse in telecoms. Do you also fear that there could be other areas that we're not capturing properly? For instance, what's happening in the informal sector?
I certainly accept, but I don't celebrate any increase in that index because at the end of the day, whether it's 82 or 100 trillion or whatever it is, so long as you cannot compare the performance of your economy, these critical indices of your economy do not reflect that of successful economies elsewhere, you are a failure. Successful economies elsewhere, inflation rate is never more than 1.52%. When it goes above 2%, it's crisis. Unemployment never reaches the peak of or the height of about 23% or much more.